I honestly don't know. I was under the impression that you could be deported for speech.
If you are inciting violence, that's a category of unprotected speech. It is not my impression that there's anything that lets the government discriminate against individuals with immigration purposes who are already admitted into the country and who are lawful permanent residents on the basis of pure speech.
See, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. My lawyer is ChatGPT. So if you're a lawyer, you say that's right, I'll believe you.
Okay, but you seem to have a strong opinion that just because the law gives some level of discretion to immigration officers that it's legally okay. You were just like citing the statute mindlessly.
Yeah, pretty much. Legally, now I'm 100% legally you shouldn't be deported.
Oh, Hey folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description. Yo, yo, yo. How we doing, H0?
What's up?
Hey, man. Hey, what should I call you?
You can call me Hayden.
Hayden, awesome. Hayden, do you want to give us a little introduction? Who are you and what are your thoughts?
I'm a complete stranger from Twitter.
Yeah, you replied, I think, to one of my tweets about the ongoing drama related to the green card purported revocation by the Trump administration of an individual who is accused of supporting Hamas. Is that fair?
Yes.
Awesome. So I think it would be nice, I think, to start off with like our positions. It's my position that this is unlawful, unjustifiable, and bad. And what's your position?
I'm like 60-40 in favor of not deporting Kahlil or whatever his name is, but I kind of just want a better argument as to why he shouldn't be deported. Because right now I'm thinking legally, Trump has every right to deport him, or his administration does. But morally, I would say that I err more on the free speech side of things.
Got it. So you don't necessarily agree with the deportation, but you contest my conclusion that it is legally unviable or not allowed.
Yeah, so basically, as I understand it, the INA says that you can deport someone if they support terrorist organizations, which I think the apartheid, whatever it was, that organization explicitly does support not necessarily Hamas, but terrorist actions against the United States.
Okay, so we're going to start with the, I guess, the notion that because the INA makes individuals who are members of organizations that support, quote, terrorist activity, he is such a member, and therefore he is deportable under the INA, and therefore he should be deported. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Or he should be
morally,
allowed,
I don't.
that the government has the right
He
to
should be
deport him.
allowed to be. Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So let me start off by doing some throat clearers, and then we'll get into that. One, you agree he has not been charged with or admitted to any crime. Is that fair?
Correct.
So to the extent that anyone is making accusations of criminal activity, they're neither here nor there because they don't relate to the purpose by which he's being sort of purportedly having his green card revoked. Fair?
Yes.
All right. And I think you would also agree that the administration, I don't know if you've seen this, the administration said that we're not alleging that he broke any law, right?
I believe that.
Okay. So what the administration has cited is the Secretary of State's determination that keeping him around would not be in the interest of the United States because it would be counter to the national security concerns of the country. But in addition, so that's one basis under which purportedly you can make someone deportable, but you're also citing parts of the INA that make one deportable for being a member of a group that endorses or supports terrorist activity.
Yeah. Do you necessarily have to be a member, or can it just be as an individual support terrorism?
Well, you're asking
as
me.
I understand.
You're asking me,
Right.
So which provision of the INA are you citing? So there's one for terrorism activities, which maps onto the requirements of the inadmissibility grounds. So we can go to the inadmissibility grounds, and that generally says that any alien, so I agree he is an alien, who is a member of an organization, is a representative of a political or social or other group that endorses or espouses terrorist activity. So is that the basis under which you're saying that he is deportable under the statute?
Yeah.
Okay. So for those of you following along, and you know what, I might even just pull this up for people to see. That might be helpful. Would you guys like that in the chat? Let me pull it up so you guys can see what we're talking about. Give me one sec. Appreciate your patience, man. And this will go here, and we'll do this. I think it's always helpful to look at the sources. So this is be source share. And we'll do this for the Microsoft Edge. Nice. Cool. So for those of you following along at home, this is what we're looking at. So he had been inspected and admitted because he's a green card holder. So he's not subject to the grounds of inadmissibility. He's subject to the grounds of deportability. And so this is 8 USC 1227. However, there's a provision of 1227 that makes deportable any alien, which he is, who is described in subparagraphs B or F of section 1182A3 of this title. Those are the grounds of inadmissibility. So because this ground of deportability links to a ground of inadmissibility, we can go to the grounds of inadmissibility. We go to the grounds of inadmissibility, and we go down to A sub 3, little a sub 3, and it says anyone who is a member under sub B or sub F. And so this is big B, terrorist activities. In general, any alien who has engaged in a terrorist activity, and let's see the definition of terrorist activity. The definition of terrorist activity as used in this chapter, the term terrorist activity, means any activity which is unlawful under the laws of the place where it is committed, or which, if it had been committed in the United States, would be unlawful under the laws of the United States or any state, and which involves any of the following: the hijacking or sabotage of any conveyance, the seizing or detaining and threatening to kill, injure, or continue to detain another individual in order to compel a third person, including a government organization, to do or abstain from doing any act as an explicit or implicit condition for the release of the individual seized or detained, a violent attack upon an internationally protected person or upon the liberty of such a person, an assassination, the use of any biological agent, chemical agent, or nuclear weapon or device, or explosive firearm or other weapon or dangerous device, with intent to endanger directly or indirectly the safety of one or more individuals to cause substantial damage or to cause substantial damage to property, or a threat, attempt, or conspiracy to do any of the foregoing. That's the definition of terrorist activity. So would you agree that there's no evidence that has been provided by anybody that he has engaged in terrorist activity?
I wouldn't say by the Trump administration, but from what I can see online, the organization that he is a part of definitely has. So, for example, the Columbia University Apartheid, Divest, has said on their Instagram page that they want to destroy Western civilization, which I think that would fall under.
Okay, so just to be 100% clear, you think that they have engaged in the hijacking or sabotaging of any conveyance, the seizing or detaining and threatening to kill, injure, or continue to detain another individual in order to compel a third person. So any one of these 1 through 6, you think that they have done this?
Yeah.
Which of these have they done?
I think you necessarily would have to do those things to destroy Western civilization.
Okay, so anyone who says Western civilization must be destroyed, they couldn't mean legal. They couldn't mean cultural. They couldn't mean it's not. It has to be using one of these methods. I'll ask that as a question.
I think
does it have to be one of these methods that when someone says we want to bring about the downfall of Western civilization, what they have to mean, it's entailed that they use one of these methods?
No, probably not, but I think it's reasonable to assume that's what they meant.
Really? I mean, there are a lot of people who say that Western civilization, Western imperialism needs to end. That America, for example, there are ANCAPs who say that American government needs to end, that Western dominance needs to end, that we need to move towards a communist utopia, that we all need to become international, that say that it must be done with peaceful means. So it can't. There's actually a lot of people who say that. Would you agree?
Uh, sure, some people maybe, but I think even with the case with ANCAPs, they actually do support violence against the government.
You think ANCAPs, there's not peaceful ANCAPs who espouse peaceful means to end the government?
Yeah, it's maybe like 1% of ANCAPs.
You think 99% of ANCAPs advocate for violent means that are covered under the statute?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Okay. But you would acknowledge there are at least some individuals who do not advocate using these means to bring about the downfall of Western civilization. Fair?
Sure, I'll grant you that.
Okay. So if we have the statement bring about the downfall of Western civilization, do you think that that statement alone, advocating for the downfall of Western civilization, is necessarily engaging in terrorist activity? Yes or no?
Yeah, probably not.
Okay. So the mere fact that this organization advocates for the end of Western civilization, or Western, however you want to define it, you would say that that is not terrorism activity as defined by this statute. Fair?
Sure, that alone, but let me ask you this. If you do engage in acts such as occupying buildings illegally, would that maybe persuade you that they are talking about violent means?
Not necessarily, no.
You wouldn't say that illegally occupying a building is
No,
at
no.
least sort of violent in your
Well,
eyes?
I think it's violent. I think forcibly occupying these things are violent, but I don't think that that's hijacking or sabotaging a conveyance. I don't think that's seizing, detaining, or threatening to kill another individual to abstain from doing an act. I don't think that's a violent attack on an internationally protected person. I don't think that's an assassination. I don't think that's the use of any biological agent, chemical agent, or nuclear weapon or device, or explosive firearm or other weapon or dangerous device with intent to directly or indirectly. I mean, this is a specific statute that has a bunch of specific means, and the occupation of buildings generally, which I agree is a form of violence, is not listed.
Okay, so just let me play devil's advocate here. Let's say legally he's 100% in the right. How about morally? Is he not morally indefensible for supporting violent actions against the U.S.?
I've condemned. Well, first of all, I've condemned a lot of these protests, and I think including people who are spreading Hamas propaganda or trying to justify October 7th. I don't. That's not what we're here to discuss, and I just want to say from the outset, I don't agree with probably most of these protesters. But what we're discussing now is the legal grounds for his deep or alleged revocation of his green card and then deportation.
Sure, I'll give you that.
Okay, so you would
I'll
agree, therefore, that
concede the
there's.
argument.
Well, don't concede the whole argument. That was just sub one. So that's an
Oh,
alien who
okay.
has engaged in terrorist activity. Do you think that there's evidence that Mahmoud Kahlil has engaged in terrorist activity?
As defined by that, no.
Okay. So sub two, an alien who a consular officer, the attorney general, or the secretary of Homeland Security knows or has reasonable grounds to believe is engaged or is likely to engage after entry in any terrorist activity. So he's already entered, but it's the same kind of thing. Do you think that there's a showing that he's likely to engage in the terrorist activity that you say that he hasn't done?
As a personal judgment, I'd say it's pretty likely, but I guess you're just gonna have to take Marco Rubio's word for it that he has evidence he's linked to Hamas.
Wait, do you think that there's any evidence that he's engaged in that he will engage in terrorist activity that he's never engaged in or that you don't have evidence to believe that he has ever engaged in?
I personally think he would based on his actions, but I don't think legally that would hold up.
What is your basis to believe that this person who has ties to the country, who has not yet engaged in terrorist activity as defined by the statute, will in the future?
Because he's part of an organization that illegally occupied buildings.
But he's already done that, and he
Which
didn't engage in terrorist activity when he did that.
well, sure, Bin Laden didn't go straight to 9/11 either.
Okay. So you think that there's a reasonable basis to believe that he will engage in terrorist activity even though he hasn't yet?
Yeah, I'm not saying he necessarily would, but if I was part of defending the country, I would definitely look into it. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that he would never.
I'm not saying, is there a sufficient ground you think, do you have reasonable grounds to believe he is likely to engage in terrorist activity?
Define reasonable.
What again, this is the grounding of all law. What a normally adjusted person, let's say yourself, thinks is, again, it's kind of grounding out to to base legal principle. Have you seen the kind of the atlas carrying up the whole world, and underneath it is the word reasonable? It's kind of
Sure,
like,
yeah.
yeah, what a reasonably prudent person might think. I know it's kind of circular, but that is what it is. A reasonably prudent person in your mind, in your estimation, let's say, would think is likely. That it follows. It's a maybe a better definition might be, if we're going into like philosophical terms, an inference that is, more likely than not. We'll say. I know that's not
Yeah,
the term reasonable. It's a little lower than that, but just more likely than not. We'll say.
can I give you like a hypothetical?
Sure.
So if like say there's like this Nazi with a green card and somehow got into the country and he has organized protests against Israel
Mm-hmm.
and he's has a Instagram account that says he wants the downfall of Eastern or Israeli civilization,
Mm-hmm.
but the only violent act that he has committed is occupying a building, would you say there's a reasonable inference you could make that maybe he would support terrorist actions in the future?
I don't think that there's a reasonable ground to believe that he will engage in terrorist activity if all he's done is some kind of criminal trespass, and again, terrorist activity as defined by the statute. No, I don't think that that's enough for a reasonably prudent person. I mean, there are a lot of people who espouse really bad beliefs that I don't agree with, that I think would entail some level of violence. I think, for example, one of like a lot of generic MAGA beliefs are like that. People who come to this country espousing a lot of MAGA beliefs or racist beliefs. But unless you can show evidence that, like, hey, they're planning a kidnapping, or hey, there's some person who is, I don't know, alleging that he talked to this individual, and that they were planning an attack of some kind, or planning to threaten the mayor to do some kind of action or political action in exchange for them not, kidnapping their daughter. Like, that would be kind of some basis to believe that they're going to cause terrorist activity, or engage in terrorist activity at a later date. But if all you can show me is activities that are not covered as terrorist activity and nothing linking them directly to terrorist activity, then I think that you're out of luck.
I mean, if a European MAGA supporter was trying to enter the US under a green card, I would also want them investigated
Hang on,
because,
they're
like you
already
said, they're
entered.
part.
He's already admitted. He's in the country. We'll get to the First Amendment. We're just trying to see if there's a
They,
statutory basis.
they've
We haven't
been
even
here for
touched the First
5 years.
Amendment. I want you to be aware, we have not touched the First Amendment yet. All we're doing is establishing a statutory basis to remove this person. And I hope everyone who's watching understands we have not touched the First Amendment yet. And so, by the way, even if I did think that he was advocating for violence in abstract terms, I would say that that it's illegal to deport him, just to be clear. But we're just establishing a statutory basis to get rid of him.
Okay.
So
So say a MAGA supporter
yeah,
has been in America prior to Trump starting the MAGA movement, but then he becomes MAGA, but he's still a green card holder. Shouldn't it be reasonable to investigate him for extremist activities?
we're not talking about investigation. Yeah, it could be reasonable
Can
to
we
investigate.
sketch an Okay, sweet.
Investigation is a low threshold, but what's happened is not, strictly speaking, investigation. There's an action that's taken place. The action is he's been arrested, and they're saying they're going to deport him, and they've purported to rescind his green card. That's what's happened. So we're way beyond investigation. Agreed? We're beyond investigation?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Do you think there's
So
a
I
reasonable
probably
basis?
agree with.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go for it.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Basically, like, my question is it enough for you to have supported, let's say, assume that he supports Palestinian resistance by Hamas, let's call it, against Israel? And he says something like, but I don't agree with attacks on civilians, but I do think that Hamas should attack the IDF, something like that. And he did what he did on the campus, which doesn't amount to terrorist activity. Do you think that's enough to establish a reasonable ground that he's going to engage in terrorist activity himself?
Personally, yes. Legally, maybe not.
Okay. So you don't think that that should be sufficient legal cause? This sub 2.
I think it should be significant legal cause, but I'm not sure if that's what the law says.
Well, the law says reasonable grounds to believe that he's likely to engage after entry in terrorist activity. He's already entered, but we're in the grounds for inadmissibility. That's why it says it that way. But I don't think that it's reasonably likely that he's going to engage in terrorist activity. You know, he has a daughter or sorry, a wife and a child in the way, a wife who's 8 months pregnant. He's like lives in New York. He's a Columbia student. What's the evidence that this is some guy who's going to engage in terrorist activity? It seems like a really low threshold for you to think that someone's likely to engage in terrorist activity.
So, someone being a part of an organization that says they want to destroy Western civilization and has led protests that have illegally occupied buildings, that is unreasonable to say that they would support violent action.
Again, we're not saying violent action. We're saying terrorist activity.
Same difference.
Do you think that violence and terrorist activity as defined by the statute are the same?
Well, I don't think he's going to go out there and commit random acts of violence for no reason.
No, I asked you a
I would
question. Do you think
assume it
that
would have a
violence,
political motivation.
do you think that violence and terrorist activity as defined by this statute are the same thing, yes or no?
No.
Okay. So if he goes out and occupies another building, is he engaged in terrorist activity as defined by the statute?
Yeah, again, sorry.
If he goes out and just occupies another building or occupies a Columbia building again, he might commit some other crime that makes him deportable. But again, we're not talking about those. I see the super chat, by the way. I'll address it after. Is he engaging in terrorist activity if he just keeps on occupying buildings as defined by the statute?
No.
Okay, so then I don't think that it's sufficient to think that he will just because he did something that isn't terrorist activity, and just because he said some beliefs that you think, you know, that are probably supportive of Hamas in some respects.
Well, like I said, just because I don't think it's legally defined as terrorism doesn't mean I don't think it personally. I would say that occupying a building for a political belief in support of Hamas would be terrorism. But if it's not legally defined as terrorism, then sure.
Okay. So sub 3 is, has under the circumstances indicated an intention to cause death or serious bodily harm, incited terrorist activity, incitement under the legal standard, which is a high threshold. So do you think that under the circumstances, he has indicated an intention to cause death or serious bodily injury? First, I'll ask.
Legally speaking, I don't think saying just you want to destroy Western civilization is, but personally, I think it is.
Okay, so I guess I'll tailor my question. Do you think he should be deportable for indicating an intention to cause death or serious bodily harm under the statute?
No.
Okay. What
like
about
I said, I'll concede the legal argument.
The whole legal argument, or just so far?
Probably the whole thing. If you brought me this far and I agree with you, I doubt anything would change my mind.
Let's step back, right? So what we're doing right now is finding a statutory basis to deport this individual. Yeah. And by the way, I would not concede that outright someone saying on the street, hey, we need to get to a violent revolution. I think that's protected speech. I think that's what our precedent tells us. So
for
even
a
if
US citizen or a green card holder?
For both.
From what I understand, the criteria you need to meet as a green card holder is a lot lower than as a US citizen.
The criteria for what?
For legal action or being deported.
You can't be deported as a citizen.
That's why I said legal action or being deported.
Okay,
The
so
criteria for being deported is a lot lower. Well,
well,
you
what's
know
the
what I mean.
criteria for being deported as a citizen?
None, I misspoke. You can't be
Okay.
deported.
Yeah, so green card holders can be deported. I agree with that. The question is on what grounds. So let me give you an example. Do you think that it would be constitutional for the government to deport people on the basis of race?
No.
Why not?
Because race is a protected class?
So, speech is protected.
Sure, but we have laws that say certain speech is grounds to get you deported. Right?
Yes.
For example, if you say you support a terrorist group, that is grounds for you being deported.
Yeah, and if we had a law that said that if you're black, you should be deported, would you say, okay, I guess that we should follow that law?
No, because I don't think you should follow immoral laws. But legally, yeah, you could deport someone for
So you
being
think if
black if that was
Congress
the
passes a
case.
law that says if you're black, you are inadmissible and deportable, you think that that's a legal law?
Oh, no. Under the Constitution, it wouldn't be legal.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
sorry.
So there's a little thing, Constitution. You got to follow that first. And so, yes, the INA says something like if you give material support or if you really what people are looking for is for you to have said under sub 4 if he's a representative as defined in clause 5 of a terrorist organization as defined in clause 6 or a political, social or other group that endorses or espouses terrorist activity. What they were waiting for you to say is that this Columbia group endorses or espouses terrorist activity. Well, then again, I would just look for the evidentiary basis for that, and we'd have a little discussion about whether this Columbia student group actually endorses or espouses terrorist activity as defined by the statute. But then what I would say is, okay, assume that there is a law that says that we can make a content-based restriction or impose some kind of penalty on a person who has significant ties to the country, sufficient to be a green card holder, who is in the country, who's already been inspected and admitted, on the basis of their political view. A political view that, if expressed by a U.S. citizen, would be completely protected. It would be no different than there being a law
Okay.
that says, like, all right, imagine this law said something else. Is a representative of a political, social, or other group that endorses or espouses DEI.
Wait, so are you argument that the INA is unconstitutional and that's why you don't agree with it?
Not necessarily. As applied, it could be unconstitutional. Certain parts of the INA have been held to be unconstitutional. As applied, right? I'm not saying that the whole INA has to go or that even this particular section has to go as applied to everybody. But if the application is getting towards protected speech, and if there is no constitutional basis for you to infringe on that speech, and if the person who is raising this claim is entitled to raise the claim, then of course it should not be found to be constitutional to apply that statute in that way to that person. Just like if there was a law that said, if you're a representative of an organization that espouses racism, right? You can imagine that Congress passes a law like that. And maybe there are some
Sure.
constitutional applications of that. If you're sending money perhaps to organizations abroad, or if you're, providing arms to racist groups abroad, maybe that there are some places where the First Amendment has no purchase on that law. But here, we're talking about pure political speech.
Yeah. So I guess I really don't understand what you're getting at here.
What justifies
What?
the government imposing a limitation or a restriction or discriminating on the basis of protected speech in the provision of green cards or the rescinding of green cards?
I guess I don't know. You'd have to look at their justification for why they passed it in the first place.
Their justification is he supports Hamas.
Yeah.
He's a national
Well,
security
I don't
risk.
know if. Yeah. And they're allowed to deport him based on the INA as it currently is right now. Yes or no?
No. No, we have precedent in Holder, which states that these material support laws can't target independent advocacy.
Does that apply to
there's,
green holders or U.S. citizens?
of course it applies to green card holders. Why wouldn't it apply to green? Why do you think that the Constitution? Let's say I'll give you an example. Do you think that green card holders can be tortured under the
No, no,
Constitution?
I'm not saying that green card holders have zero protections. I'm saying that they have less than U.S. citizens.
Okay, so let's start by investigating what those differences are. I agree with you that green card holders can't run for office, federal office. Green card holders can't vote, but there are explicit provisions in our Constitution that will allow for that, or there's case law on point that states that it's okay for the government to restrict the vote to non-citizens. But my question
And
is,
there's a law, the INA, that
yeah,
restricts their
but
speech.
but we have precedent on point that says that these kinds of material support provisions do not apply to independent advocacy.
I've never heard of it. You're the lawyer. Can you give me an
Holder
example of a
versus
case that
Humanitarian
says
Law
that?
Project. Holder versus Humanitarian Law Project. Everyone was very clear. They said, don't worry, don't worry. This is not going to touch independent advocacy. This is because they were talking directly to the PKK and these other terrorist groups. And because there was an actual coordination and communication between the terrorist groups and the individuals.
Okay, so if Kahlil was acting on part of an organization that was in direct contact with Hamas, then he could legally be deported. But as an individual who's not tied to an organization or in direct contact with Hamas, then it's completely legal.
You're asking me?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that if he were in direct communication with Hamas, I think you'd have a different case, and it would just then be a factual case about to what extent his communications were material, and to what extent he was trying to or knowing about his communications with Hamas, and whether he was knowingly trying to help them. That would just be a kind of an evidentiary ground. But if he's in direct communication, I would follow the precedent of Holder versus Humanitarian Law Project.
So
here, all you have is
say
pure
I was
speech.
agreeing. Sure. And I honestly don't know. I was under the impression that you could be deported for speech.
Says who?
That's the law.
Yeah, for certain speech that maybe is like covered under categories of unprotected speech. So if you are threatening people with true threats, that's a category of unprotected speech. If you are inciting violence, that's a category of unprotected speech. But it is not my impression that there's anything that lets the government discriminate against individuals with immigration purposes who are already admitted into the country and who are lawful permanent residents on the basis of pure speech, pure political speech.
See, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer. My lawyer is ChatGPT. So if you're a lawyer, you say that's right, I'll believe you.
Okay, but you seem to have a strong opinion that just because the law gives some level of discretion to immigration officers that it's legally okay. You were just like citing the statute mindlessly.
Yeah, pretty much. To say I have a strong opinion, I came in here, just to be clear, that I was 60-40 in favor
You were
of not
60-40 on
deporting him.
the 60-40 on the moral policy, not on the legal question, which is what we're discussing.
For both.
For both? I didn't understand that. So
legally, now I'm 100% legally you shouldn't be deported.
Oh, hey, how you doing? Did you have a good day?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah. You just said that you don't think you
going?
should be deported legally. I think we agree on that.
Yeah, morally, I think he's a piece of shit, but
Okay. Well, that's the First Amendment. I hate this this line. Yeah.
yeah, no, I get it. You have the First Amendment right to be a dickhead. I get it.
Yeah. If they charge them with a crime, okay, go through the process. But they're not charging them with a crime because they're not doing this in good faith. They're doing it in bad faith. They're trying to scare people into not criticizing the administration or its stance on Israel or Israel itself. That's very obviously what they're doing. Yeah.
100%. I agree with you. I was just under the impression that legally they might have the right to do it even if it is wrong.
And now you think differently.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. No problem, bruh. We're here to educate and to debate and disagree. I just think that like people have this view that green card holders or non-citizens just have no rights, and that we can do anything we want to them, even if there's like a law on the books that says that we can. They forget that they have these things called the Bill of Rights, and that the First Amendment is supposed to apply to Congress. It says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. It doesn't say Congress shall not abridge the free speech rights of citizens. Now, there can be some play on the joints if someone's coming at it from a posture from outside the country, right? If you're outside the country, you might not have any rights as to get in within the country. I can understand that argument. And it can be a nuanced discussion of, well, if you've been admitted, or if you have not been admitted, do you have access to any rights whatsoever? That's a conversation I'm willing to have. Do you have any due process rights, for example, if you have not been admitted into the country? That's another conversation I'm willing to have. And I'm even willing to have a conversation with respect to student visas and certain temporary visas. You know, maybe there's some different standard that might apply there. But for lawful permanent residents that the country has deemed already to have access to the country for an indefinite period, and where the country, the Supreme Court has already held that they have due process rights, it just seems the height of, I don't know, short-sightedness to say the First Amendment doesn't apply to them. What's next?
Yeah,
The Eighth Amendment?
I would probably agree with you that they should have full First Amendment rights. But intuitively, I think most people would say, well, if you come to America and you're a green card holder, but suddenly you turn into a Nazi, that they probably have low patience for your First Amendment rights.
Okay, let's say that you become converted to a Nazi. Do you think that you should be deported?
I don't think so, but
okay.
I think I'm in the minority.
If Nazis should not be deported under the law for their Nazi beliefs, then surely even Hamas supporters, which I don't concede that he is. I'm arguing for the sake of argument that he is, but I just want to be clear. I don't have evidence that he supports Hamas, other than an alleged pamphlet that was spread from Hamas. But even that could just be he agrees with Hamas on that one point. It doesn't necessarily mean he agrees with Hamas generally. I see something in the chat that's saying, how do you know he's not charged with a crime in a FISA court? Guys, FISA is not a criminal court. It's a Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. A FISA warrant gives you evidence. Sorry, a FISA court, a FISC, right, gives you the right to surveil. Okay? So how do I know he's not charged with a crime in a FISA court? Because the FISA court is not a criminal court. You get it?
No, I'm completely
lost. Sorry, I was talking to the chat.
Yeah, I know.
My bad. Yeah, listen, it looks like we agree. I'm glad about that.
Yeah, thanks for changing my mind.
No problem, brother.
I came into Twitter this morning vehemently defending this guy, and then, I kind of got talked down from a less extreme position, and now I'm back where I was this morning.
Hey, we love to see it. We love to see it. All right, brother. Hey, if you have anything else, just DM me. You can DM me on Discord or Twitter, but it was great talking to you.
All right, see ya. Thanks for the chat.
Later, brother. All right, we got GoodLawgic in the building. How are we doing, Good?
I'm all right. How are you? How's my audio?
Your audio's okay. I'm going to put you up just a little bit, but yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I never really thought of Trump as being a constitutionalist per se. I don't think he ever was a constitutionalist.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as him being in favor of this amendment or that amendment, I mean, it's just not what his MO has ever been. But I think the claim that this has anything to do with the First Amendment violation is kind of silly.
Why do you think it's silly?
Well, what basically you have here is a guy who's coming to America to be an agitator, and he's technically in violation of regulations that would enable him to obtain a green card. Now, does that mean you can meaning I'm referring specifically to 8 USC 1182 A, which says that individuals who engage in the actions of endorsing or espousing terrorist activity, which he is on tape, he's on video doing, that they're ineligible for a green card. Someone can make an argument and say that this difference between being eligible for a green card and stripping a green card away, and I think that that's a fair distinction. I think that that's a reasonable distinction to make. Meaning, if he had conducted that activity before getting a green card, in that case, that'd be a basis to deny him one. One could argue that's not a basis to strip him of it. So, and to that extent, I think that you can say he's pushing that regulation. He's giving it a new layer, saying not only is it a basis to keep someone from having a green card, but it's also a basis to strip it away. Which that's a question really more of immigration law than it is of First Amendment rights.
Well, what do you mean? I mean,
So,
can we interrogate that just a little bit? So
go
you would
ahead.
agree. I think that you would agree. So we're not talking about any criminal activity or criminal bases of deportation. So we can ignore that for now, right?
If there was a criminal case, I assume he would have been charged. He has been criminally charged.
Right. So let's just focus on these security related, terrorism related bases of deportation. Now, I think that you would agree that there is no evidence that he himself has engaged in terrorist activity. Fair?
I haven't seen any evidence that he's engaged.
Okay.
And that would also be a crime. He's not been charged, so
Right.
I would assume
That would
not.
also be a crime. I would assume that that would be a crime because terrorist activity, as defined in the statute, usually either maps onto the place of where the jurisdiction is, or to the United States or the states. So I assume it would be a crime as well. And so we're only talking about the basis of removal here, either this kind of determination made by the secretaries that he's a national security threat, or that he is a representative of an organization that endorses or espouses terrorist activity. I'm going to assume, for the sake of this argument,
No, not part of an organization that he himself individually has.
okay, that he. I'm
Meaning
going to.
he's going out and cheered and trumpeted October 7th, which was certainly a terrorist activity. And I'm not sure if I saw him actually calling it for it to be duplicated again. But basically, he's been very open in displaying his endorsement of the events of October 7th.
I'm going to assume, for the sake of this argument, that he is, and that he himself is endorsing and espousing support for. Endorsing or espousing terrorist activity or support for a terrorist organization in Hamas, right? So for the purpose of this conversation, I'm assuming that that's been established, okay?
Okay, great.
So don't you agree that in the United States, as to a citizen, and we'll get to the green card holder, as to a citizen, the First Amendment protects our right to endorse or to espouse or agree with the morality of October 7th. The First Amendment protects that speech or belief.
100%.
100%. So if there were a law that restricted access to certain government benefits under established First Amendment principles on the basis of your support for October 7th, that would be problematic from a First Amendment perspective. Fair?
One more time? Say that. I want to make sure.
That if the government, say, for example, imposed some kind of burden on you or tried to charge you based on your First Amendment belief that and statement that October 7th was justified, that would have problematic implications from a First Amendment perspective. Obviously, maybe it's different when it's like you're a government employee and you're fired, or you're like in a school, right? So I'm just trying to incorporate whatever First Amendment principles tend to apply to this specific belief, which is support for October 7th.
So you're saying basically the government cannot pass a law that would burden you for espousing values that they disagree with.
Right.
Is that what you're trying to say? Okay. I mean that's part of the First Amendment. I agree with
Yeah. So now we have the question is like, okay, he's a green card holder.
I mean, philosophically, I think the notion that our civil rights, and this is something that I recognize the Supreme Court has disagreed with me on this, but I think philosophically it's wholly illogical to assume that civil rights should apply in any way, shape, or form to people who are not citizens of the United States the way they would apply to citizens. But even going with the Supreme Court's perspective on it rather than mine.
Wait, you think a non-citizen should be able to be tortured under the that it's constitutional to torture non-citizens?
That's you're trying to pick the most extreme example possible. And what I'm saying to you is, I don't think that you want to tell me that torture is unethical. That's one thing. That's very different from saying that there's the same protections for free speech. for the right to have a gun,
I'm
for
saying when the
all the other
Constitution.
elements.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, you're trying to give the most extreme example, and I don't know. I mean, there could be specific regulations that America might, as far as an issue of morality, come to a conclusion that it's appropriate to extend certain levels of cruel and unusual punishment with respect to people who are non-citizens. But just to make a blanket statement that it's the exact same privileges as American citizens have is philosophically flawed.
Well, I think the Constitution is clear when it's giving rights to citizens as opposed to non-citizens. So, for example, it says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It says, as opposed to other places, in the privileges or immunities clause that specify the privileges or immunities.
The lefty quoting the Second Amendment to me is.
Well, it's true. It doesn't say. These are smart lawyers who drafted our Constitution. They know the difference between citizen and person. And there are places where they say citizen, and there are places where they say person or people, or they even refer themselves to the government body. In the case of the First Amendment, it says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech. So if they meant it only to apply to citizens, why didn't they write it when they write it in other places?
I mean, I don't think it ever was considered to apply to them, because they're making a constitution for the citizens of the United States. It's by the people, other people, for the people. The whole point,
for the people.
Yeah, the people who are citizens of the United States. It's by the people.
No. I mean,
the people.
Think about it. They were very conscious of the citizenship issue. They talked about who has the right of naturalization, or to make rules about naturalization. That's Congress. They put a citizenship requirement in the for various different positions in the federal government, with the expectation, doubtless, that there would be both citizens and people in the country who are not citizens. I mean, it couldn't be the case that they weren't thinking about it.
They didn't specifically carve out citizens and say that it doesn't apply to people who are not citizens. What I'm saying is, when you're making a constitution that's designed to be by the people, of the people, for the people, it's very clearly that at least one or two of those referring specifically to citizens. And yet, for one reason or another, the whole purpose to our Bill of Rights is to protect us from government. The point being, you're putting someone, you collectively, meaning you, the American people, are going to be putting these people in charge of you. You're going to be giving these people powers and privileges that extend beyond the everyday citizen. And we want to make sure that when you're putting them in that position of power, that they're not going to use that to abuse you, the people. That's the whole point. That you, the people, are not going to be abused by your very.
But you, the people, isn't citizens. You, the citizens. You, the people, are the people of the United States. That's broader than the citizens of the United States.
Of course not. Who's electing them? The point is, when we're putting you in power, we're not giving you jurisdiction to have an illegal search and seizure. We're not giving you a jurisdiction to have cruel and unusual punishment of the people who are putting you in power. But to say that the American government should be hamstrung compared to other governments, and basically say, oh, we're going to have the exact same civil liberties for anyone who's a non-citizen, even though if you were an American and you went to a foreign country, you wouldn't be getting those civil liberties from that government, but that we're going to hamstring our own government from being able to protect the people, which is why the government's there in the first place. We're going to hamstring them from doing that with respect to people who are not American citizens. Seems philosophically.
So it's your position that the Constitution did not protect individuals other than citizens
and again,
at the framing?
I want to be clear with you. The Supreme Court has extended it to non-citizens. I'm not blind. I'm a lawyer. I understand what the Supreme Court has said. I simply think that it's fundamentally and philosophically flawed.
So what do you think about the fact that many women, don't have citizenship at the founding, that when they're married, the doctrine of coverture, right, erased their individual personhood and citizenship, and they became kind of merged with the male? Do you think that women are not protected?
That's what the Constitution says? Constitution says that they lose their personhood. Is that? Because I haven't read that part of the Constitution.
No, but that was a common practice of individuals at the framing, that women were not.
We're having a constitutional conversation, Counselor.
Yeah, we're having a constitutional conversation
as far as decisions that were made.
So what is your basis?
What is your basis that I'm unfamiliar with?
What is your historical evidence that, in fact, these individual rights were meant not to apply to non-citizens when they use the term persons, people?
I thought we went through this. What is the purpose of government? Why do we have government?
I don't know. There are a lot of different purposes.
Setting up our government. Why do we have it? Why do we have a government at all? Why?
To maximize good benefits for people.
Oh, okay, fine. And fundamentally in there, it's to ensure that the American people are well protected and provided for. Right? I mean that they're basically not
And there are a
provided
lot
for.
of
I don't
different
like that
purposes.
term because
People, reasonable
that
minds can
implies a welfare
disagree.
state.
Reasonable minds can disagree, and I'm sure reasonable minds of the founding disagreed.
So what do you think is the reason?
Historically, or my reason?
Any reason did America, when we first broke our independence, why have a government involved?
I would cite Madison. Madison said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. That's my, the fact that men are not
Oh,
angels,
okay.
we
So
need
exactly. So
governments.
it's to protect American citizens from the non-angels, from the
I didn't
demons of the
say
world.
that. I didn't say that
You
government is
just
made.
quoted Madison.
Wait,
You just quoted
I
Madison.
just
I
quoted.
didn't pick Madison. You gave
Wait,
me a quote I didn't even know before.
wait. I quoted Madison. Madison, who said, if men were angels, no government would be necessary. Didn't say citizens.
Okay. Implicitly. So we need government because men are not angels. There are
Okay, so
some
then,
demons out there.
okay, so do you read into the fact that at various different places, the Constitution says citizenship specifically, and at other places it says persons? Do you read into that fact?
You want to sit there and try to shoehorn in that because you have to be a citizen in order to be elected president of the United States.
Not just there. The
That
14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment says, for example, that persons are, who have the protection of, have equal protection, and that the privileges or immunities of the citizens of the United States, that those are the privileges or immunities that states cannot disparage. So it seems in the very amendment, the 14th Amendment, let's say, as just was one example, there's an acknowledgement that citizenship is not coextensive with personhood.
Well, the 14th Amendment is specifically addressing the issue of citizenship. That's why it was drafted. So at that point, now we're 80 years later, and they're trying to basically wrap their heads as to what they want to constitutionally bind in there with respect to citizenship. So
Okay.
that's not really the same thing as the Bill of Rights, right?
Well, I don't know. The First Amendment seems to have an implication on the Bill of Rights. You seem to think, for
There was
example,
no one alive.
wait.
There
So
was no one alive. None
let's
of the
just
drafters of the founders were alive when the 14th Amendment was written. Can we agree on that?
agreed on that. So agreed on that. But you seem to think, for example, that it would be against the First Amendment for states to infringe on free speech. Fair.
Yes.
Well, the First Amendment clearly says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech.
That's right.
So clearly,
That's
you
right.
think
And
the 14th Amendment affects the First Amendment.
It was refined. It was refined over time. Look, you don't need to prove to me that non-citizens have Bill of Rights protections. I already conceded the fact that the Supreme Court has recognized.
But you seem to be like, oh, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that.
No, I'm conceding. I think it's philosophically flawed. I'm conceding that is the law. So
Okay.
I'm not blind to what the existence of the law
so
is.
we can move on then, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
So what is it about? So if a green card holder, if there were a law that said,
let me ask you this. So the argument I think you're making to me, I think the argument you're trying to make to me is this. I think you're trying to make to me the argument that by burdening Kahlil Mahmoud by saying you cannot have this speech, and since you engaged in this speech, we're stripping you your green card. So now that's dropping a burden on him, right? That's
it's
the way
making
that Congress and the federal government.
A category or restriction or penalty on the basis of protected speech, correct?
So my question for you is this: let's say he was applying for a green card now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the government would have a right to keep him out?
I think that's different, and I'll tell you why. Now, ultimately, I think the answer that I would give is it depends on that. It depends on where he is physically, geographically. But you understand, I think you would, that an application for admission from outside the country is different than someone who has already received a benefit while inside the country having that benefit removed, torn from them, and them being deported. So I would, if you're asking me my personal opinion, I would say that the government, from a posture of admission, which is what a green card application would be. It's an application for admission. If that were the case and you were outside of the country, I think there's very little that you could argue that you would have any kind of substantive rights as a foreign citizen.
Right, First Amendment right.
Right.
First Amendment right.
But once you're inside this country, geographically, I think that this is my opinion. I think that changes substantially. Just like we don't apply First Amendment rights to foreign corporations. That changes if you're incorporated inside the United States. And it also applies, I think, differently to certain individuals with significant ties to the country. And that would include, in my opinion, at a bare minimum, U.S. citizens and green card holders who are abroad coming back inside. So that's all a way of me saying it's a little bit more complicated from the posture of admission than it is from exclusion or deportation. But in general, if anything is
Because
going to be protected, it'll be this.
all right. So what I'm saying is, so that's exactly the gray area that Trump has now walked into. Because you seem to implicitly be accepting the fact that a restriction on your First Amendment rights is acceptable for keeping someone out.
No, no,
Now
no,
the
no, no, no,
question
no, no,
is,
no, no. So sorry. Real important distinction there. That it would not be a First Amendment infringement necessarily, as applied to people
what would it be?
out, because they don't have any standing to raise those constitutional claims for outsiders, non-LPRs outside of the country trying to come in. Does that make sense?
See, I don't, you're the one making the argument. So
I'm making so I'm asking if you understand it, right? So if for example, a foreign corporation trying to raise First Amendment arguments in the United States, that foreign corporation can't raise First Amendment claims. It's not a First Amendment issue, right? It's outside of the category of the First Amendment. The First Amendment doesn't extend beyond the borders of the United States towards to foreign entities, for example. I would cabin that with respect to U.S. citizens and LPRs, that U.S. citizens and LPRs from a foreign posture coming in might have a different standing there. But I'm willing to
look at you
accept.
being so fair, Citizens United. Here we go.
What's that? Yeah, wait a second. So
You're making a
I
whole
think that this is
Citizens United argument right
I think
here.
this is totally reasonable that there are some groups of people in the world for whom the First Amendment does not apply. I think you agree with that.
Oh, of course.
Okay.
I think we may apply it too broadly as it is.
Okay,
I was making that
but
point
the difference
15
is
minutes here.
for LPRs who are inside the country where the First Amendment absolutely does apply, we're in a different world. Just like the due process clause doesn't necessarily apply for people who want to get hearings outside of the country trying to come in. That might be a matter of grace for America to do. But once you're inside the country, you're entitled to procedures, especially if you're an LPR. If they're going to deport you.
Basically entitled, you're saying you're entitled. The term LPR that you keep using, what is that a reference to?
Lawful permanent resident.
Oh, okay. You, at one point you were talking about corporations. I wasn't sure what you meant by that. So a lawful permanent resident, you're saying, should have the exact same protections. And what I'm saying to you is, it's not a citizen. And in the same way you can keep a citizen out, I think you can make an argument that you need to maintain the same conduct while you have a green card that you would need to have to get the green card. I think that's an immigration issue. I mean, why? Because because if you're coming here and you're claiming that you have a basis to be here and that you're an acceptable individual to the United States, it's not like once you get in, then you can run amok, and those obligations, which were a prerequisite for your admission, no longer apply to you because once I passed the hurdle on day X,
is that true of naturalized
citizens?
citizens?
Now I no longer have to maintain that.
Is that true of naturalization? Is that true of naturalization?
Not sure. Frankly, it's not. I mean, you're saying once someone is naturalized, that's a date X?
Yeah. So you have to do certain things to become naturalized.
So Ilhan Omar, for example, she takes her oath of fidelity to the United States when she gets naturalized, right? And then she starts engaging in conduct that some people would say is not showing an oath of fidelity to the United States, but showing fidelity to her native home country, right?
Yeah.
So do I think that that's a basis to strip her of her citizenship? No, I don't. I wish it would be. I wish it would be. But what I'm saying is
because you're an anti-free speech goblin.
No, I'm not an anti-free speech goblin. What I'm saying is, if you're taking an oath of fidelity to the United States, how stupid is it that it's a 10-second oath, which doesn't have to mean anything, and literally 3 minutes after you make the oath, if you break the oath, there's nothing that can be done to you. I mean, how logical is that? Do you tell me is that actually sensible? Type of policy that literally 3 minutes you can make your oath, walk out of the building, and then just start screaming "Death to America," and you just 3 minutes early made an oath that you're pledging your loyalty to America, but basically that you should look is that an ongoing oath? Clearly,
you're asking me what's sensible, what's not sensible, and I'll try to answer. I just want to say real quick, IRI, thank you very much for the raid, you guys. IRI, the best C-SPAN channel there is. You're gonna want to watch it. So I just want to be clear. What's sensible, what's not sensible is not the basis under which I make constitutional determinations. It's not very sensible to go through all this like different, hemming and hawing with respect to gun rights a lot of the times, right? It's like it's very burdensome to go through a trial to convict someone that you know is guilty. It's very burdensome. Is it really sensible for us to have to like sit
No,
here
that
and
is all sensible, though. Every bit of that is sensible. Every bit of that is a logical explanation. It might be frustrating in the moment, but it's logical why you have to have proof beyond a reasonable doubt. See, that's all. There's good logic
good
there.
logic?
So
Huh?
like saying, no, I mean it makes sense. What I'm simply saying is, at
So
the end of
maybe
the
it makes
day,
sense to have cutoffs.
you want to try
Maybe it
and
makes sense to
turn
have
this.
cutoffs.
You want to try and term this as a constitutional issue. What I'm saying is the question as to whether or not it's a constitutional issue or an immigration issue ultimately comes down to what is the burden of someone who has a green card to maintain their green card. And in fact,
Yeah.
if they have that burden, if they have no burden, then you're right. And if they do have a burden, then you're wrong. It's really that simple.
So I'm asking you, right? So like, do you think that green card holders
I'm
should
not
have
an
first?
immigration lawyer specialist, but to me,
Whether
this
you're
feels
not,
like an immigration issue.
do you think that green card holders have First Amendment rights?
When I say they have First Amendment rights, that's a good question. I think anyone who visits here has a First Amendment right.
Okay, so do
According to
green
Supreme
card holders
Court.
have First Amendment rights?
Yeah, I think that while they're in the country, probably,
Okay, so here's a question for you:
they probably
if
do.
if Congress passed a law that said we get to deport you as a green card holder if you're Jewish, do you think that law would be constitutional?
Obviously not.
Why? Obviously not. It's immigration. There's terms and conditions. You can't reject them.
What does that mean?
So
That's
why
yeah.
why do we
I,
have
I, I
to?
don't understand. See,
Yeah,
now
I'll
you
explain it. I'll explain it. Why do we have to support the First Amendment with respect to the religious clauses and protect green card holders on that level?
By the way,
But
I love that you're standing up for the First Amendment because you took a 4-year hiatus from
that's
that. You
bullshit.
took a
That's
4-year
complete
hiatus.
bullshit.
You
Also,
did.
way to try
You
to bait me.
did.
Way to try to bait
We have
me.
the right.
Way to try to
We have
bait me.
the
I'm not
right
going to get
to be
distracted.
silent for 4 years and cancel. And
Oh,
they have a
nice try.
hotline. There's a hotline from Jem Psaki
Oh
to
my
Jack
God.
Dorsey saying, take
Well,
down that guy who has
nice
300
try.
followers. Yeah, so you're like, oh
Nice.
no, this nothing doing wrong. They're a private company. They're a private company. It's totally
Nice try.
fine.
Wait. No, we'll get to that. We'll get to my alleged hypocrisy. I'm not going to ignore it, but the question's on the table. Nice. It was a really nice try, Joe. Really,
That's not a nice try. It's
it is a nice try.
accurate.
It is a nice try to bait.
Will you admit the fact? Will you admit the fact that the Biden administration was the worst abuser of First Amendment rights in the
No, I
history of
won't. And we'll
America?
address. No, I won't.
The way
No,
Judge Terry Dowd, I didn't say it. A judge
No,
who
I
looked at
won't.
Twitter files, that's what they said. They said this is clearly the worst abuse of First Amendment rights this country has ever seen.
No, I won't.
And you're
admit
telling me,
it.
oh, no. Let's
Nice
sit here
try.
complaining about Trump with his First Amendment rights. Oh, let's
Nice try. Nice try, Joe. We will definitely.
That's a nice try.
We will
That's
talk
not a nice
about.
try. What I'm saying to you is, at the end of the day, it comes down to a simple factor: do you need to maintain the same standard while you're here as a green card as you need to have when you're applying for a green card? It's really that simple. Now we have to have sort of a cutoff date. You can understand with a naturalized person, an Ilhan Omar example, you sort of have to have a cutoff date that, hey, this is a citizen. We're not going to be following them around to
I'm not
see
going to
are
get
they breaking their
distracted.
own. So what are you going to do? So it's basically it's pragmatically impracticable to actually try and monitor whether people are maintaining their oath of fidelity. And it makes sense to say, look, this is a citizen. They're naturalized. They're a full citizen now, and treat them the same as every other citizen. And I say, God bless. They went through the whole process. I'm sure it was very burdensome and tiresome, exhausting, and they have those rights. And even if I can't stand that individual, I think they're destructive to America, like an Ilhan Omar. I still say that crazy bitch is an American citizen. And she's afforded all the same protections as you and me. Now, that's very different from a green card holder, though.
Oh, okay, can we talk about it? Because I understand you're very angry at Joe Biden, and I'm happy to talk about.
I'm not angry at Joe Biden.
I'm not going to get distracted.
It's
I'm
really
not
the
going to get
circle of people around
distracted.
him. I don't think he knew what the hell was happening for 4 years.
I know exactly what my question is, and I'm going to go back to it. I just want to let you know.
Let's go.
All right, so just to be clear, I will address this allegation.
I got 10 minutes left.
I know you do.
I
Yes, and I'm sure it'll be a great show. I will address it though afterwards. That said, the question's on the table. Do you think it would be permissible, constitutional, for the government to pass a law that says if you are a member of the Jewish faith, you can be deported by the government if you're a green card holder? If the government passed that law, do you think it would be constitutional?
That if you're a member of the Jewish faith, what? No.
No. Why? Because the First Amendment protects even green card holders from these kinds of religious tests, just like the First Amendment with respect to speech protects green card holders in the same exact way.
Let me ask you a question, Pisco. Pisco, I can ask back the exact same question at you, brother. The exact same question at you. If they said to get a green card, you have to reject Judaism, do you think that would be something that would be constitutional? Answer: no. So you can't compare the religion, but yet you admitted that there are certain things of speech that would keep you out. So you can't compare free speech to freedom of religion with respect to admission into this country, because you yourself would recognize there's a distinction between saying we're not going to have black people here, we're not going to have Muslims here, or whatever other, we're not going to have redheaded Irish people here. That all that crap would be completely unconstitutional, even for admission to getting a green card. So that's why your analogy here is rather poor.
So wait. So you think that people applying for admission have a First Amendment right not to have their a religious test applied to their admission?
I think that.
So they do have First Amendment rights. Sure so non-citizens applying from outside of the country have First Amendment rights.
I don't know if we would call that First Amendment rights, or if it's. Frankly, I sort of need to like research to figure out exactly what basis that would just be completely beyond legality. So you're, I mean, you want to talk philosophically here now about whether or not it's
talking philosophically. I'm trying to.
Who's the holder? You're asking who's the holder of the right? Is it the individual who's a non-citizen who's the holder of a right? I don't know.
I seem to recall a case about the quote unquote Muslim ban, and I seem to recall a given president trying to argue that I understand the Muslim ban turned out to be a country specific ban, but I seem to recall a president who was pretty annoyed.
I recall the Muslim ban being him saying whatever Obama did, that's what we're doing.
Okay, but he was angry that he wasn't able to put on. He was angry. He was angry.
His tone was different.
He was angry. He was angry that he wasn't able to put on.
Orange Man bad and is angry. He sent it a mean tweet. So even though the policy's identical, but it was a mean tweet in there, and that's what makes it racist.
But let's just separate this real quick. So you think that this green? So I just want to be very clear about something. You think that a green card holder, an LPR, who is citing the First Amendment within the country, can do so, but only with respect to the religious clauses and not with respect to the first speech?
No, I think you think that. I think you think there's a distinction.
Whoa, well, you seem to think there's a distinction.
No, I think we're both on the same page. I'm just admitting it. You're not. That there's a vast distinction between religion and speech on this issue.
Why? They're part of the same clause.
The reason I'm saying you admit it is because we started this whole conversation off with you saying, yeah, to get in here, I can understand that someone who's espousing terrorist activity could legally be kept out of here.
Wait. So that's applying Supreme Court precedent. I don't know that case was rightly decided.
Why? So why is that legal? Why is that legal? Don't they have a First Amendment right?
I'm following Supreme Court precedent there. That the Supreme Court precedent says that at the threshold of admission, but if you take, for example, Justice,
maybe they can say that maybe I don't know, maybe the INS can say we're not taking any Jews or Muslims. Maybe they can. I mean,
do you think they can?
Point. It's like, what I'm saying is you're asking me what the legality of it is, and my point is you yourself recognize there's a distinction here. Do you think it would be legal? Do you think it would be legal for them to say no Muslims or Jews allowed?
That the Supreme Court expounds a standard that I'm trying to say in determining whether something is legal or not legal. I think it's highly relevant what the Supreme Court has said in the past, and the Supreme Court has said
I didn't dispute that.
Okay,
No, go on.
so
What they tell me what they said. The relevant part.
so
Go
the
ahead.
Supreme Court has said at the threshold of admission that everything that there's a very low threshold or very low test for whether or not a restriction on your entry into the country, which they see as a pure act of grace, whether that is unconstitutional. It's basically at the discretion of the
Okay, what's
political
the case?
branches.
What's the case? Oh, that's
Well,
cool. What's the
the
case?
case is Trump versus Trump versus Hawaii. There's cases Mazzei. That's another case. It's Harisides or is another. There are a bunch of. I have the cases. Don't try to test me, bro. You know I have the cases.
No, no, no. I want to know. Read it. I'm not. I'm not testing you. I want to look it up. So
So
my question is,
Trump
where
versus
exactly are we in
Hawaii.
disagreement with you? Do
Trump
you
versus
agree with me? Do you agree with me that it would be illegal for Biden or Trump to pass a law banning Muslims or Jews from coming into the country?
I think it would be.
Okay, I agree with you there. Do you agree with me that it's completely legal for them to say, hey, if this person's giving pro-terrorist speeches, that we're not going to give you a green card? Do you think that's legal?
I think that under current precedent, it probably is legal, but I don't know. I don't
Okay,
necessarily. Yeah. No.
so you're already recognizing a distinction between religion and speech because they can't ban you for your religion, but they can ban you for speech. So even though they're both thrown into the First Amendment together, you cannot just analogize the two of them together because you and I are both on the same page. That's not the
Wait.
same.
Just because the First Amendment doctrine, that there's a split here in terms potentially split between speech and religion. You still have to analyze them under their respective tests. So it could be the case at this First Amendment activity that there is a compelling purpose of, applying the actual test from the First Amendment, which is strict scrutiny, that kind of speech passes. That strict scrutiny, for in the case of applicants from outside of the country coming into the country, that it passes strict scrutiny, and that the religious tests
Maybe
don't.
that'll happen.
So it could be the case.
Maybe that'll happen for
so
Kahlil
just to be
Mahmoud.
clear, just because you have a different result with respect to application of a First Amendment principle in speech versus religion doesn't mean that you don't apply those principles in those cases. So I hope that makes sense, right? Did what I just say make sense?
What you're, I think, what I'm trying to get from what you're throwing down now is that it really is the same. It's just that the ban on Muslim and Jews is so ridiculously egregious that would be like banning someone for saying that they like the Red Sox. Like it's
Right,
not
right. So imagine. So if there is, as you are aware, if there's a speech regulation that affects pure political speech, it could be the case that that's nonetheless justified because of strict scrutiny. It passes the test that the Supreme Court itself has laid out. So it could be the case that the Supreme Court, if cleanly given one of these like very ridiculous cases where you say I like the Red Sox, that met with that it wouldn't pass muster under strict scrutiny, and it could be that the outright religious ban on entry of aliens into the country that would also not pass strict scrutiny, but you're still applying the highest tests of each First Amendment principle. That's all to say it's neither here nor there. I'm trying to make the case for within the United States where we agree the First Amendment standards are much higher. I think you and I both agree on that. Maybe you could say they're kind of there outside the country, but we're talking about LPR, someone who has significant ties to the country, someone who has access to due process rights to be ejected from the country. They have access to a trial by jury for criminal convictions. They can't be tortured. They can't just be randomly killed.
Every person under American authority has a right to a trial. You
Yeah.
can't even. That applies to everyone. It's not even in the country.
And you said that green card holders have a right to free speech because you said even visitors have a right to free speech.
That's true. They do have a right to free speech. I just don't think it's. I don't think that this is an issue as far as free speech any more than it's an issue of free speech.
Wait, no. That can't be the case.
So
you acknowledge that it's speech at issue here.
I think it probably is speech at issue. Yeah. That's what we start. Yeah. And this comes down to whether or not he has to maintain uphold the same standard. This is exactly what I said when I came in here. I laid down exactly where our line of dispute is. And nothing you've said has contradicted that in the slightest. I laid down the line of dispute, and I started off by basically saying the question is whether this restriction that the United States is lawfully allowed to apply to people who are not in the United States in order to obtain a green card can be maintained against them while they're here with a green card. And that's really what it comes down to. And if they can, If they can make sure he maintains it, in that case, Trump is 100% in the right. And if they cannot make sure that he maintains it, in that case, he's in the wrong. And Khalil Mahmoud is
What
going to come
makes
back
you
in
think?
here.
What makes you think that a green card holder with permanent ties to this country, who lives in this country, is on the same footing as a non-green card holder applying for green card status? What makes you think that that's the same thing?
I think he's not a citizen. I think he's still.
But
he's
you
still
said
trying,
you
he's still
yourself
trying to
said that
become a
even
citizen.
visitors to this country who come temporarily to this country have First Amendment rights. What does that First Amendment right mean?
I think logic dictates, and I really do need to go. I'm ready.
Okay,
I'm ready,
all right.
I'm ready. But I think logic dictates that if someone's trying to get into this country and they're and when they step foot in this country and they basically are holding themselves one way and they reveal while they're here during the naturalization process that's all crap.
That's an issue of fraud. That's an issue of whether that's an issue of fraud.
To me, common sense dictates that what I think you're allowed to remove the guy. You don't have to stay in his company. And that's not a matter of prosecuting.
That's a question of fraud, though. What you're saying is that you're saying
you're
that we
not
don't
throwing
believe
him in
them.
jail. You're not throwing him in jail. You're just saying, look, you don't qualify. Goodbye. We're taking away your green card.
Okay,
Adios.
last question, then you can go. Last question, then you can go. If there was a law that was passed by the country that said, if you support the state of Israel, we are allowed to deport you summarily if you're a green card holder. If you support the state of Israel, do you think that would be constitutional?
That's not terrorist activity.
Yeah, but they passed a law that says we consider Israel to be a state sponsor of terrorists, and we think that
if Israel was declared to be state-sponsored terrorism, then that would already be the law.
Well, I'm asking you if they
declared Israel different than the Red Sox. What makes them different than the Red Sox? The only thing that makes it different.
Just answer the question. So, if it's the case that the government says we don't like Israel, we don't agree with Israel, we think Israel's bad, and they say, if you're a green card holder,
and the Red Sox, we hate Israel and the Red Sox. Go on.
Yeah. And wait, no, we're talking about Israel specifically. They say Israel has committed a genocide. They say Israel has committed a genocide. That's what they say. The government says in this hypothetical. I'm not asking you for your opinion on whether that's true or not. I'm saying in the hypothetical, Israel, the findings of Congress and the executive are that Israel has committed a genocide, that Israel is a sponsor of terrorism, that Israel conducts terrorist operations and kills innocent civilians by the tens of thousands. And they say because of this, any alien who supports or endorses the state of Israel is hereby deportable, including and especially green card holders, constitutional or not.
What I'm saying is consistent with what the current status is. Once they would designate Israel as a terror state, that alone would do it. They wouldn't need to go even a step further.
Would it be constitutional or not?
That's deportable. What I'm saying is, that the same way you can change the word Israel for Hamas. Yes, it's constitutional.
And it's constitutional if it's Red Sox.
No, what I'm saying is once it's designated as a terrorist organization, that's the significance of the designation.
They would have to be designated as a terrorist organization by the government.
Well, yeah, what I'm saying is...
what if they say Red Sox...
Our government is saying that this is a terrorist organization.
Yeah,
so
FC Barcelona... Well, we'll just say this. Right? FC Barcelona, it's a football team, soccer team. They are engaged in negative...
Terrorists?
No, not terrorism. They say negative economic activity against the United States. They want to boycott America. And that's contrary to our national interests. And so anyone who supports FC Barcelona and is an alien is immediately deportable.
I don't know. Does that fall under 8 U.S.C. 1182?
No, imagine they make a law that says that.
Oh, and that sounds like a habeas corpus type of thing, right?
What would it be constitutional to remove someone on the basis of a disfavored status because of economic activity internationally?
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, all right.
Maybe not. I haven't thought about it. I mean, I don't know what we're getting at. I think we're.
The question is, I think that the pulling on these strands makes you uncomfortable because the truth is, it feels good to deport people who are supportive of Hamas. It feels good for you to deport people who you find in support of Hamas. It doesn't feel good to deport someone because they support a baseball team or a soccer team or because they support Israel. That seems wrong to you.
I'm glad you brought this up because that's a tweet I sent out a day or two ago, which is If this was Tommy Robinson, who was here on a green card, and he was espousing hatred against Muslims, you, Pisco, and none of these people on the left would be screaming about how this is a First Amendment right.
I
Zero of
absolutely would. Wait. So first of
I
all,
don't believe. I'm
I
sorry. I'm
absolutely
calling
would.
you a liar.
No,
I'm
yeah,
sorry. I call you a liar. I don't think it's true.
I absolutely would.
I don't believe it for a second.
I don't agree
I
with
don't believe it.
Hamas.
I saw 4 years. I saw 4 years of you blinding yourself. 4 years where
What
you
are you
can't even
talking
recognize the
about? When
corruption
did
of the
Biden
Biden
do
DOJ.
this?
I saw 4 years. I saw 4 years of you blinding yourself to the Twitter files and blinding yourself to how our
Oh
U.S.
my
government, with
God.
our FBI, had 50 agents working within private organizations to control social media. They had a full-time job. Our job is to monitor tweets, and you
So you must be
that away and
screaming
say,
right now at Elon Musk, right?
no
You must be
one,
screaming at
you're
the
out there doing
private-public
First Amendment
partnership
stuff.
with Elon
Where
Musk,
was it?
with Facebook, with Zuckerberg. You must be screaming from the hills at the level of control that the Trump administration now has over social media. I'm sure you're screaming, right?
What control do they have?
Bro, Elon Musk is a member of this administration.
Elon Musk was always the owner of X.
He is now a member of the administration, and he is deprioritizing. He is changing. Yes, he is. He's changing the community notes.
I don't know what his status is.
He's banning certain people and not other people.
Dude, I had to go 5. This
All
is
right.
a whole other conversation. I had to go
man.
5 minutes ago.
Hey,
All
have
right,
a good one, bro.
Good chat, though.
Yeah, later.